Alex, CEO of Alex's Supper Club. I'm on a mission to get as many of you cooking one meal a day as possible. Hi, today we're cooking vegetarian moussaka. Bit of a twist, instead of using Quorn, we're actually going to use lots of vegetables. But if you wanted to, you could replace the celeriac and mushrooms with Quorn, so you can do some variations on this. So we've got a very hot pan on now. I'm actually going to steam fry all of this to make it even more healthy. So instead of using oil and cooking the oil, we're actually going to use some water. So we're just going to put the water in. This is the step where we actually basically make the vegetable sauce, which is the, if you like, what would have been a bolognese if it was a meat moussaka. So we're going to put the onions in first and let those start cooking until they go a bit translucent. And if you just need to add a bit more water, just keep adding some water just to keep the pan nice and moist. And really important that you have a nice hot pan before you put things in so that they don't sort of go a bit sad and limp, so we actually get this cooking and so that it cooks quickly rather than being here all day cooking dinner. So we've got carrots and celery just going in. And again, just give the pan a chance to heat up again before we add anything else. Now we're going to add the main two ingredients flavour-wise. So we've got celeriac. So this is just a small head of celeriac grated. And the reason I've grated all of it is just for speed. It's much, much quicker to grate it all, and it's much, much quicker to cook it all once it's grated, rather than having to chop all of these ingredients so that they're really small. So the celeriac and the mushrooms are essentially acting instead of the meat. So if you were making a meat moussaka at this point, this is where you'd be adding your minced beef. Just going to pop a lid on just to help it cook a bit quicker. So we're just going to leave that to soften up for a couple of minutes before we're going to add, we've got some garlic, cumin and cinnamon. And then also tomato puree and tinned tomatoes. So it's been about 2-3 minutes and this is just all wilted down nicely, and you can see it's all softened up already. And because it's grated, it cooks really, really quickly. So we're just going to now add a couple of cloves of garlic. Again, optional. If you don't like garlic, leave it out. About half a teaspoon of cumin and half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Again, you can chop and change and add different herbs and spices. This is just what I'm going to add today. Then we're going to add our tomato puree. So that's the tomato puree added. Just give that a good stir in. And it smells amazing now. And we're going to add some salt and pepper. Really important to season at this stage. Otherwise, once you're sort of layering it all together and putting it together, it's kind of too late. And you'll end up putting lots of salt and pepper on your plate at the end. Whereas if you put a bit in now, it'll season it much better. Tin of tomatoes. Again, if you wanted to, you could use fresh tomatoes if it's the summer and they're in season, but it's really up to you. Probably need about 6 or 7 tomatoes peeled and chopped, or you can just put a tin in. We're just going to let that come up to temperature for a minute. So that's just had literally another minute or two just to bring it up to temperature. And all we're going to do now is add lots of fresh herbs. So I've got a bunch of mint and a bunch of oregano, and we're just going to pour those in. And it's just, use the herbs that you've got in your fridge. So many people will buy a bunch of herbs, they're quite expensive, use maybe a sprig or two, and then they end up going off in the fridge. Just use the whole lot, chuck it in and get the flavour there. And then this is the really important part now, is to actually taste the mix, because if you don't taste it now and then you layer it up and realise you've done something wrong, it's going to be too late. So we're just going to try a little bit. A little bit more salt. That's lovely, it's good to go. And there we are. That's our vegetarian sauce for the moussaka. And we're just going to grill the aubergines next. So I'm just going to put this to one side now because it's cooked. Unlike a meat sort of sauce, you don't need to cook it and cook it and cook it. The less you cook the vegetables, the better, because the more flavour you'll have and the fresher it'll be. So we're just going to pop it off to the side. So the next step is to griddle the aubergines. All that I've done, I've got 2 aubergines, I've just sliced them thinly, I've sprinkled a bit of salt on them and left them for about 20 minutes and then rinsed them off just to help them cook, otherwise they can get a bit sort of dry and you need to use a lot of oil. I've got a really, really hot griddle pan on here and we're just going to layer the aubergines in, griddle them on each side and then they're good to go as well. Shouldn't need any salt on them because we've salted them already, maybe just a little bit of pepper. But again, we'll taste them once they're cooked and see what we need to do. So the aubergines are just starting to, you can see the griddle marks starting to come through. We're just going to turn them over and give them another couple of minutes on this side. And then whilst these are continuing to cook, we can just keep an eye on these and we're going to make the white sauce. So we've got a pan on here, not too high heat, and we're going to make a roux. So we've got 50 grams of butter. I'm using dairy-free butter today, but it's entirely up to you what you use. So into the butter we've got 50 grams of flour, and this is just a basic white sauce. Just going to mix that in. And then we're going to slowly add the milk. I've got a pint of soya milk here. Again, you can use normal milk, whatever you like using. It really doesn't matter for this recipe. It will work, whatever you use. You could even use vegetable stock or chicken stock if you wanted it to be lighter again. And I'm going to swap my wooden spoon for a whisk so that we don't end up with lumps. And just whisk until we get a nice smooth sauce. And then gradually keep adding the soya milk. Don't worry if it looks lumpy at this stage, it quite often does that. Just keep whisking and it'll come out into a smooth sauce, and just keep adding the soya milk slowly. Meanwhile, keeping an eye on the aubergines, and once they're ready on both sides, just take them off onto your tray. Ready for the next batch. So all the milk is added now into the white sauce, and again we're just going to season it, because if we don't, you're going to have a moussaka that doesn't taste so great. So a good pinch of salt, and a bit more, and some pepper, and a little bit of nutmeg. And again, optional. If you don't like the nutmeg, leave it out, but if you do, in it goes. Okay, so we've put probably about half a teaspoon of nutmeg in. You can buy it ready grated, or you can grate it, probably a piece of nutmeg. We're just going to mix that in. And this is just starting to sort of come up to a simmering point. You really need to get it to simmer and boil for the flour to thicken the white sauce, otherwise you're just going to have a kind of watery white sauce. And we're going to taste it to make sure it's all right, to see if we need any more seasoning. And it does actually need some more salt. Again though, personal choice. If it's salty enough, then leave it out. If it's not, add some more in. But it's easier to season at this stage of food than when it's on your plate afterwards, when you generally have to add a lot more salt than you would if you used it in the cooking. Okay, so that's just coming up to the boil now and thickening nicely. Much better. The difference is amazing, just from a pinch of salt. So we're just going to turn the heat off now and put that to the side while we finish our aubergines, and then we'll layer up. So we're just finishing off the aubergines. They're all griddled nicely. I've put them into a bowl because what I want to do is taste one and then actually probably add some pepper and a bit of olive oil just to make them really juicy and nice, so that when we layer them into the moussaka, they're really as tasty as they can be. So you just literally want to break a piece off and try. Yeah, there's enough salt on them already because they've already been salted earlier. So a good grind of pepper and a good slug of olive oil. And again, I don't like using olive oil and cooking it too much, but because this is just going to go in the oven now, we're not sort of frying the oil and getting it to a really super high temperature. But it is just going to give the aubergines a really nice sheen and texture and make them really juicy and tasty. Just a bit of a stir, touch more oil. Again, you can leave this out if you want to, if you really want to leave it out. Give those a mix. And then just before we start layering up, we've got our white sauce, which has cooled down slightly now, and we're actually just going to beat an egg into it. So we're literally just going to crack the egg in and whisk it. The reason for doing this is that when you have the moussaka, it'll actually help the white sauce on the top set. So if you've ever eaten moussaka and you've got a nice thick layer of the white sauce that's all set, it's actually the egg that helps do that. So that it doesn't sort of stay runny. Like in a lasagna, you don't have the egg and the white sauce stays runny. The egg will actually just give it a real richness and help it set. Just whisking it through. And you don't want to add the egg when this white sauce is too hot either, otherwise you'll actually cook the egg straight away rather than when you layer it up. And there we are, and we're ready to start layering. So we're going to layer the moussaka together now. So we've got our white sauce, our vegetable sauce, aubergines, potatoes, and then finally cheese for the top. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to this vegetable sauce because it looks a little bit dry, and when you bake it in the oven it will dry out a bit more. So I'm just literally just going to add a splash of water just to make it a little bit more juicy. And then we're just going to layer. So we're going to start with the vegetables. And then we're going to layer our aubergines, which they're fairly cool now, so you can use your fingers just to layer those all up nicely. And then back to the vegetable sauce. And some aubergines again. It's really up to you how many layers you do, but I tend to find 2 layers of aubergine and 1 layer of potatoes is fine. And if there's a few more left, just put them in. So you've got a nice layer. The rest of the vegetable sauce. And now our potatoes. And then finally the white sauce, and we're just going to pour all of the white sauce over the top. Give it one last whisk. And remember at this point everything's been seasoned, so it should all taste delicious. Just spread that over. And then last but not least, we've got some grated Parmesan cheese. Again, if you've gone completely dairy-free with this, then you can use a dairy-free cheese. I've got Parmesan. I don't eat a huge amount of dairy, but I do eat cheese, and Parmesan's very strong cheese, so you don't need to use a huge amount. But you could use anything you fancy, cheddar, mozzarella, whatever you like. I just prefer to use Parmesan because you can use less of it and still have a really good flavour. And that's it. And all that's left to do is pop it in the oven for about 40 minutes to an hour till it's nice and golden brown and bubbling. And then you eat. So the moussaka's been in for 40 minutes now in a hot oven, and we're just going to take it out and serve it up. And here we are. You can see it's lovely and golden brown and bubbling and ready to eat. And that's how you make vegetarian moussaka.